Episode number 58, The Art of Putting the Right Energy in the Right Place at the Right Time. Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. So my concept of balance is prescriptive. That's the best word for it. It's very prescriptive. I can look at any organization and help you better understand where you need to put your energy next, right now, for as long as it might take to do what needs to be done. Organizations are fairly simple to me, to now. It hasn't always been that way. Clarity starts to come after a few decades of doing this. We know we have a selling sphere that determines the quantity and quality of the revenue that's going to come into our system. We have a planning sphere that's going to determine, one, how profitable that revenue is going to be, how well we are going to execute it. We have an execution team that's going to go out there and do a good job. And oddly enough, that's the least of my concerns, because that's the thing that most of us do fairly well. It's running a business that we struggle with. But many of the same principles of running a good business will improve your execution sphere. That's another podcast. That's a good one. And then we have the administration of the business. We have the business behind the business that keeps everything going. We have to pay attention to that. So really, selling, planning, and administration is the business of your business. Execution is the product of your business. It's the output. And if you weren't good at execution, you wouldn't need all this other stuff, right? Now, in balance, we find that we have generally two states of being as small business owners. One, which is familiar to all of us, is a state of crisis, right? Something's going down, whether it's a momentary crisis, it's a systemic crisis, it's a seasonal, financial, economic crisis, whatever it might be. And then we have opportunity. Opportunity is, that next quote you're going to work on, that next project that you're going to attempt to put together. These are the things this is why we get up every day, is for the opportunities. We don't come to work for the crises. They just come with the job, right? Balance is something that helps us in all of these situations. I have the good fortune in this latter part of my career to be able to devote more time to younger companies. And one of my missions is to help younger companies and not necessarily younger, but less experienced business owners avoid the mistakes that my generation made. And we made some good ones. We did some great things. It was a different era, but some of the things that worked for us in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s are not the things that make sense in the 2020s. So we are all in a state of learning and relearning, but young people have an opportunity, and younger companies have an opportunity to avoid some of the fundamental mistakes that we all make. Now, crisis. What are the crises that I see? The two crises I see is we have more work than we know how to handle because we haven't built up the resources. That's a planning problem. And the other crisis I see is we don't have enough work, which is a selling problem. And oddly enough, mature companies, while they have little problems in these areas, they generally do fairly well. The larger companies, more mature companies I deal with, would they like more revenue? Yes. Would they like better revenue? Yes. Are they terrified every night that they don't have enough revenue to get through the next week? No. Are they worried that their team is not going to pull it off? No. Are they worried that their team is going to get burned out pulling it off? Yes. So these are different kinds of problems than a smaller company with fewer employees, where so many of these issues weigh on the owner every single day. And balance helps us here. Now, the other thing about the balance model is it doesn't mess around. It doesn't really pull any punches. It doesn't sugarcoat it. The numbers are pretty obvious. If we put your numbers on the page, if we benchmark you against other companies and see how you're doing, we hear about your pain points. Man, I'm having a cash flow problem. I need to get a bunch of business before the end of the year. I need to hire new people, but we don't have enough money. These kinds of pain points tell us that we need to do a deeper dive and see what's really going on. Now, if you're not profitable enough, and for me, profitable is if I'm not making 20% net profit, there's something wrong, right? This is a business, you have a rental-based aspect to your business, which is ridiculously profitable. And you have a seasonality part of your business, which is doing shows, which is where most of that profit ends up getting frittered away, particularly if you're not doing enough shows, which leads us to the first problem most people have, which is a selling problem. Planning, we can figure out. We can get better at planning. We can stop stealing resources from the planning team to go out and do shows and all those little things that will help increase capacity for selling. But most people don't worry about the fact that they steal their operations manager to go out and do shows every month because they don't have enough sales to warrant otherwise. So looking at a business, understanding their pains, drilling down, 9 times out of 10, we're going to have a selling problem. Why do we have a selling problem? Well, most of us are show people. Shows just come our way. We know how to talk shows. If somebody says, hey, I have a show, can you help me do a show? We say, yes, here's how we would do it. And life goes on. Going out and finding new business is not really in our wheelhouse. Marketing, not in our wheelhouse. It's just like admin. It's like, I need a bookkeeper, right? What else do I need? Well, guess what? You're going to need HR and you've got to do payroll. You're going to have personnel problems. You're going to have to do recruiting. You've got building maintenance and management. You got to keep the toilets flushing. The internet's got to keep running. All these little annoyances that come at you all day long are under the admin sphere. Okay. The money to pay for admin comes from selling. The money paid for everything comes from selling. So you can be great at planning, great at admin, and great at execution and have a failing business because you're not great at selling. And that's what the balance model quickly points out for us. It's like, yeah, you could get better. Oh, yeah, your warehouse operation could be a little bit better. The floors could be a little bit cleaner. But that's not where you need to put your energy. You need to put your energy into selling. So what does that look like? For small business owners, it often means they have to get out of their comfort zone. They may not be able to afford to invest in selling. They may not have the extra cash or money. They may not have a line of credit. They may be maxed out on their loans. Their cash flow may have gotten tight because sales has fallen off. So if I can't afford to invest in selling and I'm in a crisis, the only thing that is left for me to do is to reduce my overhead. And overhead comes from everywhere. Overhead comes from selling, planning, and administration. Sometimes overhead comes from execution if you have execution team. Not all overhead is people, but most of your overhead is people. So trying to maintain that perfect team that you've put together to do this ideal work that you're not getting, you've put the cart before the horse and now you're in a cash flow crisis. Can you afford to invest in selling? Well, no, I can't. Well, then you need to reduce overhead. So like I said, balance is pretty blunt. I won't say it's black and white. There's some nice gray in there. It does say, well, hey, I'm not willing to reduce my team. I'm not willing to reduce my overhead, Tom, or I can't reduce my overhead. I've cut everything I can possibly cut. Then you have no choice but to double down on selling. Well, that's good information. What are we going to do about it? Right? This is when you need to put on your hat and think like a show person. You set up the show. You do everything the client agreed to. Everything's perfect. Client walks in 2 hours before doors and says, hey, we need to turn this around 180 degrees. Didn't you get my note? And we don't have time to argue about it. We don't have time to get extra crew in. We don't have time to do anything except move and move fast and find every person we can and give them something that they can do to get this room turned around. And this is a real scenario. I've been there. I've used Houseman to reset a whole AV show. So yeah, when it comes to selling, sometimes we have to repurpose the team we have to help us in that selling process. And this is where things get pretty fun and pretty exciting, because you'll find you've got some very talented people on your team who are actually comfortable talking to folks, who know how to put some automation together for marketing, who can write a couple of emails, who don't mind scouring reams and reams of email addresses to find folks that we need to talk to again. If you divide up the work, you would be shocked and amazed at how much selling you can get done in a short amount of time. And once you've done that and you've seen the success for it, you're going to want to institutionalize it because it does work. So I watch people market on LinkedIn every day. I get emails from folks. I get calls from people. People call me to ask me if I would hire them to do their AV because I do events. There are efforts out there that you are capable of making. You probably have the team to do it. But if you don't want to reduce your overhead, we're all going to have to wear a different hat to get that work done. So if you're a smaller business and you're struggling with stuff, let me show you how balance works and how the balance model can help give you some clarity, help you better understand where you need to be devoting your time. Where do you need to make an investment? Where do you need to hold back? Buying a new piece of gear is not going to help your revenue, right? It may be fun. It may be a great dopamine hit. We all love our gear, but that's not going to fix your problem. We've got to look at your overhead, but we really need to take a look at your selling. So if you need help with that, let's have a conversation and see how we can get you moving. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. Don't forget to call your past clients and say hello. Talk to you next week. If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimpson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimpson.com for more information.